Have you heard any of this?
Militant leader of the homosexual rights
of these AIDS carriers.
On safe sodomy subsidies.
Executing the homosexuals.
I can't believe it either. Coming up next on Get Used to It, we're going to talk about these guys, their agenda, and what we can do about it. Don't go away. Hi, I'm Sheila Kuehl. Welcome to Get Used to It, a monthly gay and lesbian issues discussion show. Today we're going to start what will be sort of a series of 3 shows. This particular show about the religious right, their agenda, and the other obstacles to the growth of our movement, characterization of us even as human beings, etc. Next month we'll do a show about pride and the way in which we counter some of this mythology and the growth of pride in our own movement. And the month after, we're going to do a show which I guess I'm going to call the real gay and lesbian agenda, a roundtable of various people who will be involved in thinking about this and taking us hopefully into the next century. But today, we're talking about obstacles to our movement, particularly the religious right, but not only. I'm very fortunate to have 3 guests. Here to my left, though you would probably say not too many people are to my left, but at least in a position here in the studio, the Reverend LaPaula Turner, who is a clergy member with the Universal Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches, and she's also the public relations coordinator for the Black, Gay, and Lesbian Leadership Forum. Welcome, LaPaula.
Thank you.
Next to her is the Reverend Kittredge Cherry, the National Ecumenical Officer of the Universal Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches, and you may know that that's an international Christian denomination of over 280 churches in 16 different countries. Welcome, Kit.
Thanks. And I'd like to emphasize of the lesbian and gay community.
Of the lesbian and gay community, thank you. And so we had 2 reverends, and now I'd like to introduce the most irreverent, Jean Hessburg, who is the California coordinator of People for the American Way. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you all. Well, you saw the little bits of clips that we used as a tease for the show, and we are going to see a little more lengthy piece from People for the American Way's video later. But want to start out talking about the religious right and their agenda. How do you think this is manifesting itself in terms of the religious right? LaPaula?
Well, actually, I think that what's happening is when people take time to really listen to what they're saying, that they will recognize that there's nothing right about this Christian movement, that I'd like to call them the crazy Christians, because I don't believe that they have any consciousness of what Christ really was saying, who Christ was, and how we can live as Christ in the world today. It's real important. The message was love, their message is hate, and not only is it not cool, I'm not down with it,
I hear you. I hear you. What do you think, Kit?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I don't like the term religious right because I don't think they're really religious. They're not right either, but I think they're more of a business that uses religious language and vocabulary and hatred based on homosexuality and other issues to make money and to try to push their agenda on the rest of the world. But I don't think they're a true church, a true religion that tries to empower people to live a full life and to create justice and love in the world.
But to use religion and organizing around people's spirituality or their own notion of their own faith, it seems to me to be a pretty easy organizing principle in a sense. You would have a lot of people who would be vulnerable to the message that God loves you but hates these other people, I guess.
I don't know why it is that, and I know that people of all colors are the consciousness that homosexuality is incorrect or sinful and evil and all those kinds of things. But I think that it's all based on the same dynamics as racism and it's and sexism and different ableism. All of these things that a person is built up because somebody else is not okay, or they determine that someone else is not okay. And I don't know who they think made them God, because it's not true.
Well, it's interesting when you say about who made them God, because the difference in the religious right is that where we might find pervasive homophobia in the world, it seems as though the religious right has seized upon it. So we're kind of in a long list of very distinguished targets.
Well, that's for
actually,
sure. I'm
you know,
witness to that.
you are, and all women, and I mean, you know, who knows? And certainly the way they treat children as well, as I think we've seen in other contexts. But it's sort of the use of religion seems to me to be particularly cynical in this aspect. And I think as two clergy, I wanted to see, you know, not only are they misrepresenting the Bible, but it seems as though, I don't know, somehow organizing people through religion seems to be kind of an easy way to get hold of their hearts and minds, as it were.
And their money, I think. That they're more after it's a power issue, it's a control issue. I don't know what you were about to say, but people, human beings, all of us don't have that drive, you know, that drive to be or to accept ourselves as whole people, or to know that life is okay or that love is okay. And so these people are like the hawks, or who, you know, it's like they swarm around and look and see where they can find someone who is so vulnerable that they will not fight back, that they have no consciousness, or that they don't use the consciousness that they have. You know, they don't use their own
So it's sort of like,
intellect.
tell me what to think and I'll go
Right,
with
I'll
you.
follow you. You know, it's like, it makes me upset about how the misuse of sheep, you know, I mean, scripturally, they're saying, they're treating these people like herds. It's like, okay, let's shepherd them. Let's let them go this way. And it's like, there are smart sheep too. I mean, all herds, I mean, you know, I have heard that actually when sheep are grazing, that there are some lookout sheep that kind of listen out and help to direct. And I you know, anybody can go wild, but somehow they reach upon that part of somebody that has said, someone has said to that person before, you have no mind of your own. You cannot think. Somebody must tell you everything to do, you know, and they hit on that somehow, and then they use it. They build on it, and they build on it, and they direct it, and it's for themselves. It has no caring for the actual condition, for the welfare, for the love, for the
So like
wholeness.
other kinds of tyranny.
Yeah, I think it's really a power issue, as you said, LaPaula, that the religious right has demagogues who are drawn to any kind of power, whether it's money, whether it's a political office, whether it's a television camera with millions in the listening audience. And another kind of power is the spiritual power. Just the language. There's a deep need in human beings to connect with God, and if they can take that need and then turn it toward their use, then they get more power.
Well, I think there's also a great deal of ambivalence in the heterosexual, or the majority population, if you will, and therefore the religious right can use fear and hate to foster the ambivalence and therefore galvanize the forces. And of course, using distorted language is the linchpin of their major strategy plan. That is number one.
And I'd like to emphasize that the language has concrete results. For example, in Metropolitan Community Churches, we've experienced arson. 18 of our buildings have been burned in our 25-year history. And there are gay bashings on the rise. The denial of resources to AIDS, people with AIDS, leads to deaths of people with AIDS. The teenage suicide rate among gay teenagers. All these are a result of the atmosphere of hate that the religious right creates.
And when you link homosexuality with crimes, as we will see in the video, as the religious right does, that's what happens.
Well,
as a
Kit was
result.
saying earlier that it's really, actually both of you talking about more of as a business than as a religion, that instead of, not really with a spiritual component. I know People for the American Way really was established to fight intolerance wherever, sort of
Right.
wherever they found it.
Right.
So when I said we're in a
Okay.
distinguished, gang of targets,
Right.
this is not the first sort of cause that People for the American Way has taken up. But do you see it as a sort of more of a secular movement that you're fighting?
No, I don't. Personally, I think I said that to you before. I don't think Pat Robertson or Jerry Falwell care who their targets are. I think I agree. It's all about power and money. And the tactics we see that they use, I think that shows it's all about power and money. The fearful and hateful language, the wedge issue, driving a wedge between homosexuals and other minorities, the attacks on our public schools, and censoring all but the most negative images of gays and lesbians in popular culture. All of that is toward the end result of bringing in money and power.
So these are really kind of the tools that they're using in order to organize people who are not gay and lesbian by demonizing us. But you're talking about in the schools. Say more about that, Jean.
Well, we just had the recent school board elections in New York, and of course the religious right vilified the Children of the Rainbow curriculum, which a lot of people don't know was established just for teachers. It was a curriculum to be used by teachers, not for students. And it was a 500-page curriculum. 2 or 3 pages were devoted to teacher sensitivity to either homosexual students or students that had gay or lesbian parents. And I think one of the reading materials that a teacher could give to a student was Heather Had Two Mommies, and the same. And the religious right used that as an issue to say that teachers are trying to convert children to homosexual lifestyle. Well, that's crazy. And what it did, also at the same time, the Christian Coalition and the religious right had run a slate of religious right candidates in all of the districts, all 5 boroughs in New York. And we won't know yet for a couple of weeks what the outcome of the election is. But it
Well,
was
it's certainly not the only place where they're trying to use the electoral process against
no.
us. I mean, we saw what happened in Colorado, what almost happened in Oregon.
In
We
San-
see the
What's
same
getting
thing
ready to
happen
happen all
in a
over.
number of states.
Sure.
And so it's not just, getting up in a pulpit somewhere and demonizing an entire,
Right.
group of
Right.
people. It's really even worse than that. Because it's, first of all, you have the electronic pulpit, which is
Right.
very powerful
Right.
and very well funded. I
Yeah.
mean,
it's very structured, and that's probably how they are mobilizing more, is because it's so structured. And when people are insecure about who they are, when people are insecure about life, they want somebody to tell them what to do. I mean, if you give somebody a project and they're not one of those driven people, probably like us, that says, oh yeah, I can do this, and well, let's try this, and let's, but if they go, what should I do? Tell me, somebody
Right.
tell me, And so it's the insecurity of individuals and groups that allows the religious wrong, the crazy Christians, to get a hold of them and say, well, look, if you can't find anything to do, come with me while you're waiting to find it. Come with me, I'll show you, I'll help you, that kind of thing. And there are recovery places for people who are so caught up in this.
Go ahead, Kit.
Well, another thing I think that's dangerous about the religious right is that it easily gets polarized into religious and Christian people are on this side and gay and lesbian people are on this side, and they tend to throw out their religion or their spirituality because they don't want to be part of the religious right, and they're missing out on a tremendous source of power and energy.
You mean we
are.
deny our own spirituality because we don't want to be associated with religion,
Yeah.
all of which appears to either be hating us or vilifying us or whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, there actually are quite a few lesbian and gay religious groups, Christian, Jewish, all kinds, Buddhist, Native American.
Right.
I was in a group that was talking about taking the Bible back from the religious right. How dare,
the Bible.
exactly, how dare they take it away.
But it does seem also that, I mean, what you said about some people are lost and they go and they like to be told what to do, in all honesty, this happens in a lot of religious organizations. I mean, lost people, lost queers are going to wander in and say, I hate myself, can you help me with this?
Right.
I mean, the fact that they seem, that the religious right is characterizing themselves as owning spirituality, as owning the correct approach, you know, God's word, etc. It seems to me to be much of the problem, because they try to corner the market, in essence, and push out and say, nobody else can do this. But I also see that they're sort of like organizing principles are different. I've seen this in elections, too. You can organize the country around hate, or you can organize the country around love. Taking care of people, sharing, you know, high taxes is really a way of sharing our own income, as it were. And that, you know, we tend to be polarized around that. And it seems to me that their essential organizing principle is hate. And that they'll need to find a target for the hate as they go along to keep people within the confines.
And division among that hate, when I was saying that the religious right seeks to divide a wedge between other minority communities, saying that homosexuality is a special right in Amendment 2, and saying that homosexuality is a learned behavior, unlike color of the skin. Well, what the religious right is doing is trying to grab hold of civil rights leaders, African American, Latinos, and say, come with us. These people want special rights, and they're not like you. When before, they had been fighting against those same people with the Civil Rights Act and the Hate Crime Statistics Act, and on down the line. It's a weak partnership at best.
Yeah, it's all based on an exclusionary principle. We are the chosen people of God, and everyone else is bad, whereas the basic principles in the Bible are to love everyone, to say we are all one. There's neither slave nor free, there's neither male nor female, there's neither Greek nor Jew. We're all one, we're all connected, we're all part of one human family.
Well, Jesus had a lot of trouble when he was trying to get that message across too. I can't say as I remember, but I mean, as you know, as I remember learning, it was because one of the theories, of course, is that he was killed because he was such a revolutionary, spoke to all the wrong people,
And the main
said
people
all
he
the wrong
criticized
stuff.
were the religious authorities of
Religious
his day.
authority, and it's the same with the Catholic Church now. I mean, we've had our own problems with the Catholic Church, and with other churches who have openly said that homosexuality is a sin, etc. Which I want to hold that a little bit, because in the second part of the show I want to talk about sort of other obstacles to our movement and to our achieving full humanity. But I want to go back for a little bit to the education part of it. Not just the secular schools, where there's a real attempt across the country, I think, to begin to capture school boards, local teachers organizations, etc., with this sort of rubric of protecting our children. But also the religious right, like the KKK and others, have their own schools, don't they?
Right.
And that's frightening. It's part of it that's frightening to me is that that it is so organized, and it is so it's closeted too. Okay, and in some senses it's closeted because they don't want you to know exactly what they're teaching. They can't really be very public with everything, but they tell their people, but this is the best way for you. This is the best way for your children to learn and everything. And it's a lot like imprisonment more than it's like education.
Well, and it's a lot like recruiting. I mean, they accuse us of recruiting, and yet that's exactly what, not only do they recruit in terms of getting converts, but to make certain that the children of every family who are members of those churches are not brought up in any kind of secular school, are not educated anywhere outside the cult or the sect. I mean, I think that there's a kind of a planning for the future to make sure that this hatred can continue. It's very sad.
The schools, the parochial schools, or private schools are even one thing. I mean, everybody is, I guess, allowed to have their own kind of school, and I understand what we're saying, but I'm not disagreeing at all. It's the push of that kind of schooling into public education, the new curriculum of pandas and people, trying to teach creationism in public schools. I think they're calling it intelligent design now, and that's how we get around teaching creationism in public schools.
You mean that
Yes, I do.
intelligent design is now the same, the word
Yes,
for creationism?
that is the word for creationism in
And that's the
pandeism.
idea that everything was created
Right.
at once or in
Right.
7 days.
Therefore, you can sort of subvert the separation of church and state. And that's what's really bothersome, because people go to public school for a variety of reasons, and we do have laws governing separation.
Well, I guess I mean, it's also the same in local city councils and, zoning boards. I mean, I've seen this kind of design to capture various public parts of, really, of the society. And I think it's a very dangerous notion. Well, we saw a few clips at the beginning from the People for the American Way video. Now we want to show you a few more, and we'll be back in just a second.
I agree with capital punishment, and I believe that homosexuality is one of those that could be coupled with murder and other sins. It would be the government that sits upon this land who would be executing the homosexuals.
You see the pink triangles that they wear, a lot of these AIDS carriers, and they say that the reason they wear these pink triangles is because the homosexuals were forced to wear them in the Nazi death camps. The reality is, the Nazi movement, the New World Order of its day, was put on the map by militant homosexuals. We are facing a new type of Gestapo. We are facing a Homintern or a homosexual Gestapo, which will break the back of every church, and that is their goal, which opposes them.
Well, I bet you need a break after that, so we're going to give you one, but don't go too far away. We'll be right back.
Hey, faggot, come here, I want to talk to you.
Okay, I don't want any trouble.
You got a problem, faggot?
I'm not gonna fight you.
Oh, yeah?
Hi, welcome back to Get Used to It. I'm Sheila Kuehl. My guests today, the Reverend LaPaula Turner, the Reverend Kittredge Cherry, and the not-so-Reverend Jean Hessburg.
My bosses are going to...
It's true. People for the American Way will love you, though. Today we're talking about the religious right and other obstacles to our achieving full humanity and equality in this society. We spent the first segment talking a lot about the religious right and their agenda, using their churches and the sort of electronic bully pulpit to spread hate, to spread lies about us, to make certain that we are characterized in extremely negative ways, demonized in essence, sort of the demon of, of the decade, and using not only their own churches, but to running in local elections, school boards, the amendments like in Colorado, using the electoral process, trying to convince other people, I guess, about our demonic tendencies. Something else that you were saying too, Jean, about the schools.
We were talking about the health framework, the whole health framework, and the emphasis toward teen pregnancy and public schools, education on AIDS and HIV, and teaching women about birth control. All of these are very delicate educational items, and the public schools handle them well. But the religious right has a problem and is working to take all of those programs out of the school, and has been successful. In some cases, the religious right is so bankrolled that they can sue a school district for certain items, and the school district will back down because they know that it'll be a lengthy and expensive lawsuit. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Of course, they've been taking for granted that just a few key words have been sufficient. In essence, I mean, you hear these guys talking, as we just did, where they'll go, abortion, lesbians. I mean, like all you have to have are these sort of little key words, and America's going to generally give a collective and run out and vote for them. But the interesting thing is, it doesn't seem to be working all that well anymore. I mean,
not at least for abortion.
When one of the twin
anyway.
Pats, gave his speech at the Republican convention.
Twin Pats, I love it.
All of a sudden, as someone said, I liked it better in the original German. I mean, it was recognized that this hatred there on the screen for America to see had gone just a little too far, and it didn't work for them.
Right.
Do you get the sense that they've lost some ground, or?
Well, I think that they really have lost. I think that that they're looking at all of the things that have happened, and they're looking at how the lesbian and gay community, how the conscious community as a whole are saying, well, I don't want to accept that. And I think that they're getting desperate. I think that they're desperate, and that's kind of scary. What's scary about that is when they thought they were okay and they had everything under control, and it's like, hey, but now we don't. So what do we do? And in desperation, then they try harder, and they are seeking to make sure that all of the physical dangers happen to the bashings and the queer bashing, all those negative kind of things.
So encouraging violent action against us. I mean, specifically encouraging it.
Right. Accepting and adopting negativity in order to promote what they claim is what God wants.
Well, it seems to me also one of the greatest dangers has been that they've provided a kind of leadership for homophobia in the country. Mm-hmm. They're not the only homophobes. It's simply that developing this agenda, demonizing us, characterizing us as sexual deviants, as people who you wouldn't want anywhere near your children. Mm-hmm. You know, that constant hammering of a message, unless it's met by other information, has an effect on the larger community, the community of people who thinks they're being reasonable, I think. So I want to talk for a couple of minutes about other obstacles to our full achievement of sort of humanity and equality in the world.
That makes me think of the old saying, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Uh-huh. And there are even some people who give lip service to liberal causes who could easily be part of the solution, but they're not taking action, so they're part of the problem. And as ecumenical director of Metropolitan Community Churches, I can't help but think of the National Council of Churches, which is a liberal organization that promotes equality and justice in some areas, but we applied for membership 11 years ago. They went through dialogue and study after study. Then just last year, they finally voted to take no action on our request for observer status because they felt if they acted one way, if they let us in, half of their members would quit. If they didn't let us in, the other half would quit. Meanwhile, nobody's getting anywhere, and the religious right is continuing to put out that message of hate of lesbian and gay people, and some of the people who could be having an effective voice to stand in solidarity with lesbian and gay people are keeping silent and allowing more gay bashings and more deaths.
I think two other huge obstacles, of course, are the military ban, one,
right,
and the Civil Rights Restoration Act, or Civil Rights Act of 1993, allowing for sexual orientation recognized as something that can't be discriminated against. That's a huge obstacle, and that needs to be worked on. I understand.
You mean the lack of civil rights is the obstacle?
Yes,
we want
inclusion in the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
And of course that won't, I understand that Congress won't look at that until after the military ban issue sort of dies down.
Really?
So that will be the next
that's their
obstacle.
strategy.
Sure, and it's probably a good strategy in order not to divide the
Well,
forces.
it's sort of a matter of making sure that we cannot be characterized as human. A human being would be accepted, you know, in their church. And I mean, the religious right, can we talk? I mean, the religious right's not the only religious group that has a problem with us.
Well, when you look at the black church, okay, the black church has been a part of a movement for civil rights, you know, ever since our existence. And in fact, our existence began because we decided it's like we don't have to sit in the back of the church or up in the balcony. It's like we're whole people and we can have church on our own, you know, kind of thing. And has been there for civil rights. I mean, through the 60s, the black church has been the place, the foundation, the comfort, the place that encourages and gives people stamina.
Gave the moral leadership for the civil rights movement.
Yeah, the whole thing. And at the same time, the black church is saying, "Oh, homosexual? No, we don't want to talk about homosexuality, you know, kind of thing." And we are everywhere. We are in every black church that exists, and those that will happen, and all of those that have passed away, you know, in the past. We are there, And part of it is that we have been so stigmatized as a race that it's hard to take on one more battle, one more fight, you know. So a lot of our leaders are saying, well, don't talk about that. You know, I mean, some of the churches, especially the AME churches, are willing to work on AIDS and work on health issues, but they're not willing to say homosexuality. They're not willing to dialogue. UFMCC, especially MCC Los Angeles, we're trying to interact with the black churches in Los Angeles so that we can have some dialogue on homosexuality, on the gay men and the lesbians that are there in their churches. I had an experience calling to try to set this up with one of the AME churches, and the secretary on the phone, you know, I said, this is about lesbian and gay rights and everything. She says, you're right, you know, lesbians and gays should have a right just like, they have a right just like everybody else, you know. I said, yeah, and the thing is that our African American churches need to be more conscious about it, because there are so many of us in the congregation, and the negative preaching about that keeps us frightened and keeps us from being whole. There was silence. It was as if, well, homosexuality, that's a white thing. It's not, you know, it's like, and I had to re-emphasize, I am a black woman talking to you, okay, and I am a lesbian, and I came out of your churches. So we are in your midst, you know. You need to talk to us, we need to talk to you, and you need to stop treating us as if we're not a part of the family.
So do you see that the homophobia in black churches, and it's certainly the same in you know, with Latino communities in the Catholic Church, and some of the in the Asian American community and the Protestant churches, and I assume in the Jewish community as well, though there's a whole different sort of take on it, that it's a different kind of thing from the religious right. It doesn't sound as though it's not like we're demons, but it's just like are we sinners? I mean, what is it? What I hear from the black churches is, you're not like us. Don't you try to sound, which I think is going to be like a whole different show we'll do around, can we compare ourselves to every other civil rights movement, and if so, do we have to talk about the differences too? But, you know, it's like saying, you're not like us. And we've been running around trying to characterize ourselves as born-again queers so that we can say, I can't help it, I can't help it, which I think is, personally, is not the best tack to take, because I can help it whether I'm Jewish or Catholic, but you don't get to discriminate against me because I choose my religion, right? I mean, that's like a specious point to me.
And I think you raised a good point when you said that it's basically saying gays and lesbians aren't human. And I think that's the basis of a lot of divisions within the church, that many denominations will not ordain lesbian and gay people, or there's a vicious fight within a lot of churches where one's saying, yes, we should ordain them, and others are saying no, and they're getting ready to split, and the whole religious landscape may change within the next decade. Another big issue in the churches right now is whether to bless lesbian and gay relationships, to have same-sex weddings. And denying those type of spiritual rights to lesbian and gay people is like saying you're not human.
Well, I think that's the point. If you characterize someone as not human, then it sounds more reasonable out in the broader world not to treat them as human. I mean, see, they're so different.
Or just as bad to ignore, as the Catholic Church
to be
does.
Invisible, right.
Just be invisible completely. Don't deal with that issue at all.
I think one of the basic problems in the church, period, and this is excluding the religious wrong, the crazy Christians, the basic thing is that sexuality is so powerful, sensuality is so powerful that people or the leaders in the churches have neglected to deal with a theology of sexuality, and that's why homosexuality, or our freedom in accepting ourselves and being all of who we are as sexual beings, frightens them. It brings out their fear, because what it means is that some guy might not be called the king one day in the bedroom, okay? Or that, you know, it's those kinds of things. Instead of dealing directly, and let's all deal with sexuality, whether it is transsexuality, bisexuality, you know, gays or lesbians or whatever that is, deal with all of it instead of trying to say, and we're back to that ism again about one is better than the other, you know?
Well, a woman from the National Council of Churches put it to me in a way that I thought was really good. She said, well, you know, I'm for civil rights, but I never thought if I thought about black and white racial issues that one day I might wake up and be black. But if I start thinking about homosexuality, one day I might wake up and find out I'm attracted to another woman.
And that's the problem. Society as a whole hasn't dealt with sexuality.
Exactly.
Look at how...
Well, I think it's... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, look at how long it's taken women to deal with sexuality, not homosexuality, just our own sexual...
I disagree. I think we've dealt with it very well, and that is we control it. No, I don't mean very correctly.
Okay, I see
I mean,
what you're
I think a part of
saying. Batting it down.
I think a part of the major power that organized religions have had historically is that they have power over the way you think of yourself in the two most powerful arenas sort of in the human life. Your sexuality or sex and your spirituality, you know, sort of your physical meaning and your spiritual meaning. And that's why I think the religious right in being very fascistic, you know, which comes from the German word fasch, which is a bundle of sticks all cut to the same length and bound. That's where the word fascist comes from. The notion we're going to cut everybody into the same mold and bind them together.
Okay.
And it's sort of like, let's do that, let's make them think that there's only a certain kind of sex or sexuality that's acceptable, and we'll control that, you know.
The hypocrisy in that is that that's what they try to teach us all the time. And when you go in the back rooms of the church and you go in the deacons' closets, you know, and you get the preachers and the teenagers, you know, it's like all kinds of horrendous things. It's like they're schizoid. They're teaching one thing and they're doing something else. And then it gets exposed, and they got everybody so bound up. They go, oh, let's forgive them. Let's forgive them, you know.
But let's not talk about me. Let's look over there.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's crazy making.
I'm Catholic. Don't get me started about hypocrisy, please.
Well, we will get you started about hypocrisy, but first we're going to take a break, so don't go away. We got another good segment for you.
At first, we didn't know what to think.
He said he was gay.
We thought we had done something.
I was so angry, so hurt.
We didn't know where to turn.
Talking to other families at Parents' Flag was a lifesaver.
Now we're closer than ever.
She's the same daughter she always was.
We love him just as much as always.
Parents' Flag helped us through it.
You are not alone. Talk to us. We understand. For the Parents Helpline nearest you, call 1-800-4FAMILY.
Hi, welcome back to Get Used to It. Today, as I'm sure you know because you've been watching all along, we're talking about obstacles to the development of our movement and our sort of full participation in society, especially the religious right, but other obstacles as well. One of the things we haven't talked about in terms of the effectiveness of the religious right and other organizations who are homophobic is the effect that it has on us as a community. I mean, earlier when we were talking about, well, people who are lost will come to the Universal Fellowship too and say, you know, I hate myself, what do I do? Don't you think this is one of the obstacles to our movement too?
Yeah, I read a survey once of lesbian and gay leaders where they asked them what was their greatest obstacle, and they were, I at least was expecting the answer to be the religious right or AIDS, and instead it said, we ourselves and our internalized homophobia, because I really think we could overcome anything if we tried, if we're together, if we believe in ourselves. But with all these messages that we get from society that you're not okay, you should be like this, we turn on each other or on other groups, other minority groups, rather than working together against the real problem.
That's why the censoring in the popular culture of anything but the most negative images is particularly dangerous. Censoring by the religious right, because if the gay and lesbian community, and even the heterosexual community, women have a problem with this too, but particularly the censoring in the gay and lesbian community, if you don't see yourself in a positive light, the self-hatred comes through. So it's insidious, the censorship. It's not just up here. It goes a lot deeper.
Yeah, and that's why it's important for us to come out, because, and like going into UFMCC, we are predominantly white organized church, and coming into the church, I was the first black woman, the first person of color in the church that I came into, and part of our becoming conscientized about who we are and getting the word out to people so that people can accept themselves and become whole is having someone with whom to identify. And it's like in all men's groups or or whatever, but if there are more people of color present and visible, if there are more gays and lesbians visible, then that's a powerful message, which most times is a lot more powerful than the hate mongering that's happening.
Well, it was
with them.
interesting. I mean, the press coverage of the march, it was like the big story was, gee, they look just like us. I mean, it was over and over and over you would hear that, and frankly, the organizers of the march were concerned about that as well. They said, look, there's going to be 1 million of us, and trying to organize the press around the march and saying, don't cave into the religious right and just shoot one person or another person. Let's see just thousands of us going by. Okay, we'll take our chances on who they are because we do look like everybody else. But this notion of normalcy and our normalcy not being censored seems to be very important. But it also kind of leads us into thinking about what happens to children, because this internalized homophobia is something we grow up with. It's either no image at all, which makes you understand that there's something real terrible about it, or as we get more vocal about how we're neat people, they get more vocal about how horrible we are. And I think the pain that it causes children about themselves, it's not the first time. I mean, I think about the little black children looking at the black and white dolls, and in terms of the preparation for Brown versus Board of Education, the study that was done, and the internalized hatred in women. We all have to unlearn hatred of our own, and they get us early.
Yeah, they do. And what we have to do is to get us early too. And I know that sounds to somebody like, oh, now she's talking about recruiting kids, And basically, what I'm saying is that in education, that we need to get more books about having two mommies. Right. We need to talk more about it. People need to come out. People need to come out to themselves so they can be whole, even if they never say it to anybody else. There's such a pride, and a wholesome pride, in being able to accept all of who you are. I think about I can't think of the name of the movie where the woman finally recognized she was a lesbian, and she just wanted to go and just tell everybody, and nothing could really dampen that. She got a dose of reality, but the thing is, at the end, she still had accepted her whole self, and we need to make sure on every level of education, on politics, the churches, anything that's out there, that we're there anyway. We might as well come out.
So there's and in my own coming out story, I knew I was a lesbian when I was a teenager, and had some period of freedom, but then realized, this is not okay with society. I better hide this if I want to be a professional woman, which was my goal, to be a professional. And my lover and I lived in the closet, didn't tell anybody we were lesbians, and thought we were doing okay. Only later, years later, when I came out, only then when looking back, I realized how much energy I had wasted keeping a secret, hiding, living in fear. Because now I have so much more energy to be who I am and to be effective changing the world.
Well, and that's all part of the agenda, is to make sure that we use all this energy. I mean, you can't even talk about telling the truth to children without saying, oh, I sound like I'm recruiting. I mean, it's as though they've grabbed the agenda to characterize everything we do as evil, even if it's exactly the same thing that they do. If they do it, it's okay. If we do it, it's evil. And that's just a way of sort of dehumanizing people. Well, it seems to me that we've talked a little bit without articulating totally, what can we do to fight this kind of thing? I mean, from the individual, which you started to talk about, LaPaula, and the church as an organization to the, you know, sort of the entire community, which is I think People for the American Way is a real effective organizing tool. What should we do? What should we tell people asking us out there what we should do?
As we were talking, we build coalitions.
Yes,
we build
yes.
coalitions. That is the way to do it. The civil rights community, the gay and lesbian community, the religious leaders, and work together on that. It's hard. It's hard to do that because everybody has their own sub-agenda. For instance, we have a gay task force that meets every 2 weeks, and we're represented of all sorts of organizations that's organized to fight the California Anti-Gay Initiative that should be on the ballot. Another thing, people need to pay attention and vote. The school board elections, I worked for the federal government myself. I worked for a member of Congress and know the process, but didn't know how many people don't vote in local elections. And since 1988, when Pat Robertson recognized that the religious right could not take over the whole country in federal elections, they have now focused on local, state, and municipal elections where the voter turnout is low. So we need to pay attention to those.
Yeah, and the voter turnout is low because we do not educate ourselves enough.
Right.
We don't read enough
Right.
because we have the television. But you know, but we need to start reading again. We need to talk to people. We need to educate ourselves so that we can educate each other. You know, we have to raise our consciousness. We must become conscience-sized and act like we got some sense, even when we don't know what we're doing. But we must get together. We cannot stay isolated, and that's one of those keys that group of people uses. Is those people who are so isolated or feel so isolated. We must not remain isolated. We must, if we cannot accept ourselves as a lesbian and a gay person, we must accept the fact that we are breathing and we are human beings and we deserve the very best.
So it's sort of it's an end to self-hatred, and that's sort of a very individual thing, although it's much easier to find an end to that in going out and joining something, you know, and if you're a religious person, or you'd like to be, to be able to go to church. I mean, I think that the UFMCC has done wonderful work in that area.
Yeah, we at Universal Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches are taking this very seriously, the religious right and those consequences. We just had a meeting in Dallas, a big strategy meeting, where we invited our whole membership there, and people came from 23 different states, all corners of the United States, and basically we looked at the patterns, and we saw the most immediate need is the lift the ban on lesbians and gays in the military, and we put together a packet of information on that's been mailed to all our churches. We're generating mail, encouraging people to write to their congressmen and women and leaders. Then we said our second issue is the ballot initiatives, like in Oregon and Colorado, that we need to be aware and informed and ready to act in those areas.
There are 9, by the way, across the country to date. So it's scary.
And then the third one is just the religious right overall, combating them, countering their hate with love, and thinking about how to do that. In Oregon, one of the successful campaigns that ended up helping keep some sanity there was on the theme, love your neighbor. Just taking simple phrases like that to say, you don't have to hate, love your neighbor.
Yeah. One of the things that's happening in the Black gay lesbian community is around the Black Gay and Lesbian Leadership Forum. We are there to talk to people, to be available to people. We have a program called the AIDS Prevention Team. There is Unity Fellowship, which is a part of the community, and we are challenging the Black churches to accept themselves and to accept us as a part of them. We don't have to do everything together, but we still breathe the same air, and so there are projects in all those places that we're working on how to reach. If you need somebody to talk to, then call us, and we're being proud of who we are and becoming more visible. There's a segment too on lifting the ban that is specifically around African American gays and lesbians.
You know, I have to say, as I said, it's a subject for a whole nother show, but it's kind of, I feel a deep ambivalence about this military ban thing, and I wonder from the religious community if it's the same. I mean, I remember marching with the religious community against the Vietnam War. Okay, I am that old. And the notion, you know, of the sort of high moral ground, etc. And also, it seems to me that we're caught in this trap where you are not believed to be fully human unless you are given the great privilege of serving your country. We won't let women do it. We won't let queers do it. Certainly up until the 1940s, we wouldn't let people of color do it, or if they did it, they had to do it in separate units so they wouldn't taint, you know,
so it wouldn't rub off.
Right, so it wouldn't rub off literally. And yet, that was what I loved about the movie Glory, is that the message of it, you know, about African American men who were desperate to be allowed to fight in the Civil War. And once they were set out at the beginning of a, you know, of an attack without guns to march off and be cannon fodder, which is really basically what, in essence, the military needs in large numbers. And they deny you every other kind of employment so that you have to go into the military and you know, get your education and your employment. It feels to me like they're being whipsawed.
But if you want to be fodder, you ought to have the choice. I mean, isn't it a matter of choice? Isn't
Well, it's sort of like a ladder thing. It's like, oh, please let me into that oven. You know what I mean? It's kind of like.
Well, and I think the enforcement of the policy against lesbians and gays in the military really varies depending on whether we're at war or not. Because our founder, Troy Perry, was in the military during the Vietnam era. He was out as a gay man to his commander. Some of them didn't believe him. They just thought he was trying to get out of it. Others believed him, but they said, oh, well, you know, we've got the Vietnam War going on, and
well,
it's okay to have a
Senator Kennedy at the, you know, the Sam Nunn hearings or whatever had this list that his very good aides had given to him, showing that the number of discharges for being queer in the military went down whenever there was a war.
That's right.
That's right. It's just like in Israel where they say, well, you're not going to get out for that. Are you kidding? Get that gun and get back in there. Because it's sort of a matter of necessity.
And it does feel like a trap. It does feel like a trap.
Yeah, I don't want to be for people going into the military, but I want to be for us being treated as fully human. So
right. And this whole thing about the military is not necessarily, you know, we're not trying to say, let us as gays and lesbians in. We're already there, you know. So I mean, we're already there, and acknowledge our presence and treat us as human beings, treat us as equals. But well, I saw several signs at the march that said, ban the military, you know, and that and it's like, that's really the bottom line. Is like, why do we have to continue to have war on any issue?
Well, it's very much the same as their war on us. I mean, the notion of let's divide and then let's hierarchize and then let's kill the one, you know, who's not as good as us, feels like wars are sort of around that same kind of thing. And yet,
it is.
It's what, in essence, what you've said. In order, we ought to have the choice to do that, because if they don't give us the choice, just like with marriage, if they don't give us the choice, then they can characterize us as animals because you see they're just not worthy.
Well, and to recognize significant contributions, as you were saying, LaPaula. Every human being, that's a basic human dignity, and that is being neglected.
I think another solution to the religious right is not so dramatic as some of the things that that are special programs, but just the ongoing day-to-day living and affirming people who are lesbian and gay and those who stand with us.
Exactly.
And I've been in Metropolitan Community Churches for years, and our training, back before there was that much emphasis on the religious right, you've been in there longer, so you can probably speak to this, they always taught us how to counteract these homophobic biblical arguments and told us, you know, when you become a pastor in Metropolitan Community Churches, you're going to be an openly lesbian and gay person. You may be the only one in your small community, and there's a lot of danger in that, and there's a lot of power in that, to prepare people for that.
That's true. I'd like to say one thing for whoever sees or hears this, to know that that the message of Christ is love, and that the message is not that you must be heterosexual, you must be white, you must be, you know, upper middle class or whatever, but that Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Come unto me. Let us share this yoke." And that's what's important. I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are. Know that you count. You are somebody.
Well, that's what was so revolutionary about his message, is to say, if nobody's better than anybody else, I mean, how is the whole fabric of society going to be upheld? They talk about us tearing up the fabric of society because we have a message of equality. Equality is a very dangerous message to people that want to keep all the power.
Right.
You know,
Right.
but it's, and it's misuse of the Bible that they have done. And the Old Testament too. I mean, Jesus himself had recourse to the Old Testament, as you recall, in making, you know, in images and talking about sort of what the real message of God was.
Right.
Well, in recognizing diversity, we have to recognize that we're all diverse individuals, culturally, sexually. Anyway, you count. And particularly in the 1990s in Los Angeles, post-Rodney King verdicts, this message of division and hate, it fodders the fire, so to speak, of all of the rest of the mess. We have to clean that up and recognize.
Well, we've made a start here, and I thank you very, very much for participating. I thank you for watching. This is Get Used to It. I want to remind you of two things. One is that we see the next couple of months as being a kind of series of these shows. Our June show will be around Pride, coincide with all our lovely Pride parades, and our July show about the real gay and lesbian agenda. We're going to do a roundtable of a bunch of people that might look familiar to you and talk about what it is we want to take into the next century with us. Also, I want to ask you to do something. I don't care what it is. Come out, join something, go to a meeting, get a friend to go with you, anything. We're going to give you some phone numbers to help you do it. People for the American Way will have a phone number showing for you here. The Universal Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches.
All right.
You can contact them, and we hope that you will join any group that can help you feel better about yourself or about your kids or your family. And also the Black, Gay, and Lesbian Leadership Forum, which has done wonderful work and ever since its founding, and I hope it does it for the next at least 600 years. And I hope you have a great time, and thank you for tuning in.